Good morning, homesteaders, gardeners, and cooks. My name is Jennifer. Welcome to Miles Away Farm. This is the early September raised bed garden tour. It is September 9th, I believe. And even though it's September, we've just come through another small heat wave where we've had temperatures in the low to high 90s. It's finally going to cool down on Tuesday, and I am so here for it. Let's go see what's happening in the somewhat sad September garden. So I am in southeast Washington, zone 7A, and we get about 170 growing days a year that are frost-free. I have 6 raised bed gardens in here that are all 4 by 8 feet, and I got these off of Amazon, and they are going on 3 years. They're metal. They weren't super expensive, and they've held up quite well. And this garden gets some shade. It gets some morning shade from the trees along here, and it gets some afternoon shade from a hedge of hops that are there in the back. And so things tend to be a little more leggy than they would be if they were in full sun, but we get enough sun that things generally do pretty well. So this bed is eggplant and peppers and a little bit of celery, and I have harvested a lot of eggplant out of here in the last month. This is Rosa Bianca, and I got 3 or 4 really nice sized ones out of here, and then this is the second wave that's just coming on, and then the other 3 eggplants in here are called Littlefinger, and it's a Japanese variety that's long and skinny like this. And I've harvested a ton off of these. And at this point, I think I'm really kind of over the eggplant. But they're still coming. And I'm thinking of making a batch of ratatouille. Maybe a ratatouille soup. That seems like a good kind of crossover between summer and fall. But these plants have done well. As you can see, they're quite leggy. They've needed to be staked up. But lots of good production on here. And then most of the rest of this bed is peppers. These are all sweet peppers. This variety is a pimento. And I have 2 pimentos in here that got really stunted early in the season, and they are just now. That one is finally recovering. One of the other ones I don't think is ever actually going to get much in the way of fruit on it. It kind of got shaded out because it was so stunted. And then most of the rest of this bed is a variety called Carmen. And sweet peppers don't always have to come in bell-shaped. These are what are called a bullhorn style sweet pepper. Carmen is a hybrid, but they are my favorite eating pepper. They are just so sweet and delicious. And then the other variety that's in here is called Stocky Red Roaster, which is also a bullhorn style, but it is a non-hybrid, so it's an open pollinated variety. Not as productive, and honestly not quite as sweet. So not a bad variety, and nice that you can save seed from it, but a little bit smaller fruit, and as I said, definitely not nearly as productive as the hybrid, which is typical of hybrids. That's part of why hybrids are popular, because they tend to do better. There's also back in there, there's one jalapeno in there, and then there's also behind that a variety called Hungarian Black. And the Hungarian Black is similar to a jalapeno, but not quite as spicy and very pretty, kind of a purple color when it's not ripe, and then it turns red when it's ripe. This is celery, which is doing quite well. It's a very long season plant. It takes a long time to grow, and it tends to get really happy about this time of year. So I'm starting to get some nice celery in here, and this will hold in my fridge once it's picked for at least a month, sometimes 2. Oh, there's an earwig in there. That is the one problem with this, is there's so many little nooks and crannies, and the earwigs absolutely love it. And so I always have damage to the stalks. Can you guys see that damage there? I always have damage to the stalks from earwigs and slugs getting into those little nooks and crannies. So it never looks perfect. Celery that you grow in your garden is always going to be much stronger flavored than the stuff that you get in the store. The stuff in the store tends to be very coddled and somewhat shaded, and so it's a much lighter flavor. This is the one shishito that I have in this bed, and we've gotten some very nice harvests off of these. They're a wonderful just frying pepper. You just throw them in a hot skillet with some oil, blister them, and then put some salt on them, and they are a wonderful appetizer or snack. So lots of shishitos in here, but kind of finally slowing down. I only needed one plant. I had way too many last year, and I was overwhelmed with shishitos, so I decided this year I was only going to put one in. But that's the pepper and eggplant bed doing well. This bed was flowering sweet peas, so not edible, but ornamental. And then originally garlic, and the garlic's been out since early July. And then there was also some nigella in here, and all of that has been taken out, and this is now fall crop of brassicas. And so we have, in this bed, we've got, oh, hello, funny little bee. Can you guys see that guy? Not sure what he's doing in there. Some little wild pollinator. This is cauliflower, broccoli, and cabbage, mostly cauliflower. And you can see I've got quite a bit of damage on some of these plants. This is just getting munched. And this is probably a combination of the cabbage white butterfly that lays eggs on this, and they are prolific in the summer. It's one of the hard things about trying to do a fall crop of brassicas is they're just everywhere. And so this has been sprayed with Bacillus thuringiensis, which is a bacteria that will kill caterpillars, but it's harmless to other critters. And then I've also sprayed some pyrethrin on here, which is good for things like pill bugs. And then in here, the white speckles that you see in here, this is Sluggo Plus, which has something that will kill slugs. And then the plus part is spinosad, which works also on pill bugs. So there's a pill bug. Also called roly-polies. They are mostly decomposers, but if they're in abundance, they can do damage to plants themselves and not just to the stuff underneath. We filled this bed up when we cleared it out and topped it off. This is a big pile of leaves from actually 2 years ago that we've had wrapped up in a pile. And so it's almost entirely broken down at this point. And this bed, the soil level had dropped quite a bit. And so we topped it off with leaf mulch, but the problem is this leaf mulch, because it was decomposing for 2 years, is just full of pill bugs, and so they're doing some damage. So we're combating the pill bugs, combating the cabbage moths, combating the slugs, combating whatever else is in here wanting to eat things. And then this, of course, is to try to keep the white cabbage butterfly from laying any more eggs on these. These seedlings they started out in my house, and then they were on my front porch, and then they were in my greenhouse. And it's really tricky to try to start fall cool crops in the dead of summer because it's hot. And so things kept getting moved around, and then they were getting very unhappy being in pots. And so I finally planted them out at about a month old. So these were started from seed at the end of July, and then they got planted out about a week ago. They have definitely increased in size in the last week, so they're definitely putting down roots and getting happy. I did lose a few. I had a couple over here. I had a couple back in there that did not make it. They didn't take well to the transplant, but there's enough in there. Brassicas tend to need at least 18 inches to 2 feet. And so if I have a 4x8 bed, that's 32 square feet. So figure a maximum of around 16 plants is kind of what I was aiming for here. And I've got actually have in terms of surviving 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I have 12 active and 1 that might make it, so 13 out of 16. So that was kind of what I was aiming for. Obviously the pots are in here just to hold this cloth up off of the plant so that they're not getting crushed when they're small. So that is that bed, my one successful replanting for fall garden bed, which is fun. And always feels like a win because it's really hard to navigate this stuff in July when it's 100 degrees. This bed, this was kale, chard, broccoli, and then early in the spring, if you go back and look at my May or June videos, I had a bunch of other brassicas in here. Most stuff has been pulled out at this point. I still have one chard that's hanging in there. I still have one kale that I plan on harvesting and just freezing everything that's there. Kale tends to get aphids this time of year, and obviously, I mean, look at the base of this kale plant, you guys. It's just crazy. It's like a tree trunk. And sometimes if I get the timing right, I can whack these off and I'll get a lot of new sprouts from the bottom. That's nice, tender new growth. But I didn't get the timing right on that. And then just for fun, also look at the base of this chard. Can you tell that chard is related to beets? They are essentially the same plant, just selected for different things. And so this is basically a big, giant, woody, not very tasty beet with some growth back. Oh, we have a visitor. Hello, my friend. This is Aber, who just had his breakfast. What are you doing, buddy? Stay out of my bed. Good job. Don't get in there. Anyway, so we finally ripped out all the stuff that was in here because it was just sad and not hanging in there very well, and so it was time to reset. And my plan is to throw some more carrots and some more beets in the rest of this bed, and I just haven't gotten to it. And at this point, it's going to be a race to see whether or not I manage to get a crop before it gets too cold, because I'm getting late enough in the season that that's probably not really going to be viable. But I do have some lovely beets in this part of the bed, and then a smattering of carrot. I didn't get a great germination on carrot, but I got some. And this was planted, I think I mentioned it in my last video. I can't remember how long this has been in. Probably about the same time that I planted those brassicas. So probably end of July is when these went in. And then I threw, you can see some old cardboard over there. I threw some cardboard over the top to try to hold the moisture in. I generally have pretty decent carrot germination in the heat. They actually like heat a lot better than people realize, but it's also very hard to keep things watered enough in the dead heat of summer. And you can see here, you see how much soil, I mean, that's almost a full hand width down there of soil that's dropped in this bed. And so we're slowly, again, topping it off with some of this nice, mostly composted leaf litter here as we reset these beds. I do have one very successful giant chard here that unfortunately, because I've been so overwhelmed with other produce, I have not really done a whole lot to harvest, and I need to just take a bunch of leaves off of this and freeze them for winter soups and winter spanakopita and that kind of thing. But that's this bed, which is mostly finished. Oh, there's a little family or flock of chickadees that are just hanging out in my garden and in my yard the last couple of days. Can you guys hear him? They are bouncing around in that almond tree, which is really fun. Chickadees are my heart bird. I just absolutely love them. I secretly think that my father is visiting me when chickadees come to visit. He passed in the mid-90s, and he loved birds. And so I always think my dad is saying hi when I see chickadees. Okay, so the other three beds out here. This is the giant, insane, only for zucchini bed. And so the edge of the bed is here. And this zucchini had climbed all the way out into the aisle and then all the way out, and it was starting to climb into this other bed. I whacked off huge chunks of this thing, and you can't even tell because it was just getting completely insane. One of the things about this particular variety, which is called Costata romanesca, is that it will send out side runners, and so it doesn't just grow from one stem. It starts from one stem, and then it'll send out a side shoot, and then another side shoot, and so it's just monstrous. And it's super, super thorny, so really unpleasant to get in there and pick because of the basically cat claws that are the stem of this stuff. But really firm, absolutely delicious zucchini. Honestly, this plant has convinced me that zucchini is actually worth eating. And it's kind of bomb-proof, and squash bugs don't really seem to like it. And so I honestly, and I shouldn't even say this out loud because it's September and it's unheard of, but I have not seen any squash bugs this year, period, which is crazy because they're rampant here. I'm guessing that maybe we had a super cold winter with a really big cold snap, and I'm thinking maybe that just took out a lot of the squash bugs. I wish I'd planted winter squash. I didn't plant any winter squash this year. But yeah, there's been 0 squash bugs in here, which is crazy. Let me show you this beautiful, beautiful flower here. There was a bee in there just a minute ago. But yeah, so it's out of Romanesca squash. Eventually this bed is going to get replanted with garlic, but that won't happen until October. And so I'm just going to let this go until we get a frost, and we'll just keep harvesting. I sell them through our local food hub, and I sell them 2 at a time, basically $1 a piece. And I probably have 20 in my cooler right now from just this last week. So this plant is just incredible. I have a couple of more celery in here that got very buried by the squash for a long time. And so I just recently unburied them. Let's see if I can find, yeah, there's the main header of the runner that was climbing over this part of the bed that I cut off and drug out of here. And so these are just recovering from being buried by the squash for quite a while. And then along this trellis, I have, these are long beans, called yard long beans, sometimes called asparagus beans. There's a bunch of different names for them, but they're called yard long for obvious reasons. They're a couple of feet. And this is a Sri Lankan long bean that I got seed at a seed swap, and I'm letting a few of these go to seed. And so this is past its prime. This is getting thick and spongy and not good eating. This is about as big as you want them to get, is about like this. And I didn't get a huge crop in here because I was competing for sun. Originally I had peas in here, and then I planted these next to the peas. And so they were competing with the peas for quite a while before I tore the peas out. And then, of course, obviously, we're getting some shade from the monster zucchini. But they're still coming, and it's been fun, and they're great in stir fries. These are not good boiled. They're not a blanch and eat kind of a bean. You really need some high heat on them. But they're still coming, and they're appreciating the fact that the weather is getting a little bit cooler. I mean, look how long this is. They're just fun. So I really enjoy them. I just think they're a really cool bean, and they're kind of a novelty as well. There's a blossom. And these are a different genus species than the typical green bean that we eat. I'll put it up on the screen. So Asian variety, but just fun. Kind of a fun novelty. And then, of course, the rest of this trellis is 3 Japanese cucumbers. And from the moment these started to produce, and again, these took a while to get going because I also had peas on this side of the trellis, and they were planted next to the peas, and so everybody was competing until I took the peas out. Once these start producing, they just don't stop. We have had probably at least a month scattered over the past 3 months of, you know, high 90s weather. Didn't slow down. These never get bitter. I cannot say enough about how great this particular variety of cucumber is. And again, there are only 3 plants in there. And again, this is another one that splits from the side and sends out runners and just keeps going. There aren't a lot of fully mature ones on here right now because I did just pick last night. Some of them will get a little bit of a curl like this. A lot of them stay straight. And within a day or maybe 2, this will be ready to pick. They're just fantastic. They're a great eating cucumber, and I absolutely love them. Beautiful little flower there. And as we get into the full thickness of this, you can see there's one there. There's 2 there. There's 1 there. There's 2 there. There's 1 there. There's 1 back in there. So yeah, there's probably at least 10 on here right now, and I just picked yesterday. So crazy productive plant. I'll put the name up on the screen. It is now, this one has gone all the way up here. And actually this, I need to get a ladder out. This actually is long enough that it could go over the top of this, and I just haven't been able to reach up there to get it. There's a pretty good, ready to go full-sized one right there. But this has climbed up over the top of this trellis and is coming down the other side, which I find quite charming. Not surprisingly. The rest of this bed, I planted some spinach and some lettuce in here. And it was just way too hot. So I got, like, this is the spinach and that germinated and managed to actually survive. So 2 plants out of, I probably put, you know, a good thimbleful of seed in here. None of the spinach came up. It was just too hot. Not surprising. And then this is volunteer beans, because I had beans in here last year and they're still volunteering. And I may, again, try to throw some new seed in here. And I would have done it this week, but it was in the 90s and it just seemed like pointless to try to plant anything in here just yet. So fall crops are tough here because we're hot for way too long. This is a lettuce that has gone to seed, and I'm letting it go to seed so that I can collect some of this. It wasn't in the way, it was kind of in the corner, and so it's just fun to let it go to seed. So this is what lettuce looks like when it's gone to seed. And I kind of like to leave a few lettuce to go to seed in my garden because they tend to drop their seed and then it'll come up when it feels like it in the early spring, and you get this early spring lettuce crop that you wouldn't have gotten otherwise because you just let it come up when it wants to come up. This is interesting. So this is a hollyhock, and this has been very, very sad with a lot of rust, and mostly has completely gone to seed. And I don't love this particular pink double, and so I'm going to take this plant out of here. But it's decided to rebloom, so that's fun. That's just happened in the last day or so. And then the rest of this bed is okra. And I had great hopes for okra this year. I've got 3 different varieties in here, and I thought with this hot weather that we had that it would do well. And I've gotten a handful. Honestly, I got less this year than I got last year. So it has just not been that happy. And I think I have too many plants. For one thing, I think it likes a lot more room. And probably there's a little bit of soil nutrition that is lacking, although clearly from this cucumber, it's not that bad. I don't know what okra wants other than to be in the south where it's humid. So yeah, I'm still harvesting a few. It's really fun roasted. I just came across a recent recipe for roasted okra where you just, you know, cut it lengthwise, not across, and then douse it with some salt and some olive oil and put it in a really hot oven and let the edges get crispy. Really delicious. So fun. But that's the okra. Hasn't been quite the success I'd hoped for. And then this is obviously some basil that has totally gone to seed at this point. Oh, that smells lovely. I'm getting over COVID. I'm 2 weeks past when I was originally infected at this point. Still a little bit congested. But for a while, I actually picked some sweet basil off my front porch and I literally couldn't smell it. That is very disheartening when that happens because you wonder, like, how long is this going to last? Obviously, there's a zinnia in there that has sprawled all over the place. So she is huge and just going everywhere. This is Queen Lime, which is one of my very, very favorite zinnias. And then the rest of this bed is sweet potatoes. And so you can't even see the bed anymore. And they actually bloomed. I had never, oh, there's one right there. Yay, I get to show you guys a sweet potato flower. Have you ever seen a sweet potato flower? How cool is that? They are in the morning glory family, if I remember correctly. But yeah, so sweet potato, and they're a very long season crop. And so basically I will harvest these. I could probably check now. I imagine there's some stuff in there that's ready to harvest. And I do need to cut these vines back because my understanding is if you cut the vines back, you get smaller potatoes and more instead of bigger potatoes and less. Hello, Bodie. And I just haven't gotten around to doing it. I never have the right tool in my hand at the right time when I'm out here. But there's 3 different varieties in here, and I'll film it when I harvest these. It's going to be super fun. I'm hoping for good results. Some years I've had really great results with sweet potatoes. Some years not so much. And then back in the back here, this is a pearmain apple, which has really done well this year. I'm very pleased with that. And then a lot of comfrey that we just chop and drop around this pearmain apple as kind of a green manure fertilizer source that we've chopped and dropped it twice, I think, this year, and it needs to be done a 3rd time. We are definitely starting to get insane again. But the bees love the flower, so it doesn't hurt anything. Other than the fact that it spreads if you let it go to seed, so you do have to kind of be aware of that. So that's the raised beds. Lastly, over here, this is our green stalk strawberries. And I'm rethinking what I'm going to do with this green stalk, because I think my new plan is I'm going to put it on my front porch, which gets morning sun and afternoon shade. I think it's too hot. I think strawberries need a little bit less heat than what this is getting. This is on a spinner, and so I can turn it. And clearly at this point, I have tons and tons of growth. It took a while for things to get going. I've kept it well watered. I've kept it well fertilized. And I've harvested probably less than 20 strawberries off of this. So just, it isn't doing what I want it to do. It could also be, this is a green stalk. I forget, I think it's the leaf. It's the one with the more shallow beds that has 7 tiers instead of 5. And maybe it's just not enough soil. Maybe there's just not enough room in there and there's too much competition. I'm not sure, but I'm going to give this one more shot next year on my front porch and see if I get a better result. And then if that doesn't work, I'm just going to stop putting strawberries in these things, because I'm super frustrated that I'm not getting more production out of what I'm doing here. Just for fun, this is a horseradish that was planted by a gopher. I have a horseradish over in the corner by that pearmain tree, and a gopher pulled part of the roots over to here. When I installed this raised bed, I knew there was a horseradish in here, and we were installing it early in the season, and the horseradish hadn't come up yet. And I had to wait to put this bed in until I knew where this horseradish was, because I knew that if I put the bed over it, it would come up right in the middle of the bed, and I didn't want to give it that real estate. But this year, I will dig this and harvest some of the root and sell a horseradish sauce in the fall. I do that usually every year or every other year, but it's been very, very happy this year, and it's not in the raised bed, which is a good thing. Horseradish, once you get it, you'll never be without it. It's got roots that go to China, and you never get all of it out, so it's just a permanent thing. So don't put it someplace you don't want it later. This is still going, our little Signet marigold, mostly dried out, and there's a few, lots and lots of seeds dropping at this point. I'll probably have seeds or babies here forever. And then a very overheated viola that's been in here all summer, but this is kind of fun. See the little baby marigolds that have come up in here, and so this is drop seed, and then they have sprouted, and so I've got baby marigolds in here. They're not going to survive a cold spell, but there's enough seed on this that it's going to last forever. And then I have volunteer nasturtiums in here. I had nasturtiums in a pot in this area last year, and they just keep coming up. And so I've got one here. I have one big one that's in one of the bottom pockets of this green stalk, but they're just volunteering. There's one there, there's one there. So they just keep coming up, which is fun. I love volunteers in my garden, as long as they're not in the wrong place. Oh, hello. Lovely. Good timing. So these are 2 different kinds of hibiscus. This one is called Luna, and it's just an ornamental hibiscus. And it's bloomed a little bit. It hasn't bloomed a ton. I don't really have it in a good spot. It's not getting great water. The soil fertility is a bit iffy. There were some bad choices made, but I have gotten some blooms out of it, which is fun. And this is supposed to be perennial. And so theoretically, it will be here next year, which is exciting if the gophers don't eat it over the winter. And then this one and this one, this is jicama hibiscus, the kind of hibiscus that you use for tea. So like red zinger, or if you've ever been in a Mexican restaurant, the kind that is used in jicama iced tea, which is delicious. Really great for you. And the part that you harvest is actually this outer calyx on this. This was a flower, and then this is the outer calyx once it's trying to go to seed. And I've harvested a couple of these. You just peel these off basically and dry them. But it's kind of stopped actively growing, and so I've just been leaving these here to do their thing. I'd like to get some seed from this, but I'm going to try this next year in pots with better nutrition and better water and see if I can get a bigger harvest off of them. But it's been really fun to just experiment with that. And this one actually looks better than it's looked all year. And so that one maybe is finally starting to get happy. We'll see if I get any flowers off of that before we get a freeze. And then of course, asparagus. I have asparagus in here that is big in the spring, and then we just let it go to seed. So it's a bit of a craziness happening out here. But that is our insane September garden. And we're coming to the end. We're on the last couple of miles of the marathon. Things are starting to slow down, and I am definitely ready for fall. Thanks for watching, tribe. If you like this kind of content, give me a thumbs up, subscribe, leave me a comment, and share. I have new content coming out every week. Lots of canning videos this time of year. And if you love garden tours, you can go back and look at 2 years of garden tours. I have a playlist.